IVM.
Hello, one, hello, all. Welcome to the Diary of the Traveling Professor. And I'm Siddharth Deshmukh, your friendly neighborhood traveling professor himself. And in mid March, I have a question for you. And that question has got many options. And do you believe in sorry. I'm not going to get into this rigmarole of asking you a question with many options because I'm sure you've already experienced this before on LinkedIn. I don't know what's happened in March, but LinkedIn polls seem to be all the rage. So today's diary entry is going to be about LinkedIn polls, what I think about them, the good bits, the bad bits, and the rest of it. Okay, so let's dive in, shall we? LinkedIn polls were something that I kind of explored a bit about almost a year ago now, about 8, 9 months back. And I was pretty impressed with the functionality of it. I think it's very easy to set up a poll. I think you get meaningful responses. I think people do respond on LinkedIn, unlike other social media. I think it's probably best suited for LinkedIn, these kind of polls, because it's a very quick way of gauging people's reactions. And so I did try it, but I was wondering why it wasn't taking off. And then I suddenly realized that maybe people are yet, not particularly maybe they're just getting used to it, I guess. But suddenly, in the month of March, I saw so many people, so many of my connections just put up questions on LinkedIn. And I must say, most of those questions were very good. They were thought provoking. And if I compare and contrast that to somebody who just asks a question and says, in one line or one word or whatever, what do you think of something like this? I would much rather prefer the poll, because in the poll means that the question has been thought through. It is not just off the cuff. Options have been thought through, and people have the ability to engage seriously for the matter at hand. It's a pretty interesting sort of situation when you get those results back and then you realize, oh, okay, so that's how people are thinking, eh? And that provides instantaneous feedback for a lot of small businesses specifically, or for a lot of entrepreneurs, or for a lot of people who are setting up things as consultants, and for a lot of people, even in big corporates. I think it is very valuable dipstick oriented feedback that you might get instead of just going for a full-fledged research study. I'm not discounting research studies, mind you. I think this is just another method of making sure that you understand that your feet are at least pointed in the right direction. And I think that that's the advantage of LinkedIn polls. I think the advantage is that A, you can quickly understand feedback from the marketplace. And B, I think that you are able to kind of course correct, to be honest. I think that's the best sort of situation to be in. But now let's look at the disadvantages. I've seen LinkedIn polls also being used for just showcasing a question just to showcase your knowledge. Yeah. And now, when you're just showcasing your knowledge, yeah, sure, it works to curate your personal brand a little bit. But beyond that, I think people can smell the coffee, guys. People can smell the coffee. So, my recommendation to all of you who are on LinkedIn is to genuinely use LinkedIn polls quite sparingly. Don't just keep blasting polls, because otherwise people will get immune to it, and then you're not going to get the responses that you want. The second thing is that the question needs to be genuine rather than just self-serving. I think the question, if it's genuine, you will get responses. Third is, make sure that you set a fairly good, strict timeline. Don't keep it open for too long. Maybe the shorter, the better. Fourth is, I think that don't think that that is research. That is just a, sort of a dipstick, if I may say that. Fifth is, always look at what is not being said. So maybe engage with people, ask people, comment on your own poll, ask people why they're saying what they're saying, follow up with people, maybe get some responses, because in that qualitative feedback is probably the nugget of gold that will connect it to why something is more of an option than something else. I feel that LinkedIn polls is an amazing way of kind of floating an idea. Like, for example, if There's a professor like me and he wants to put up something on some class, right? Online class. And I just put up that as a question and give an option, which option would you choose? What would you rather learn from me or something like that? Gets a very, very quick response. Very, very quick response. So I would certainly encourage people to do that. And you know something? It is deeply connected to a methodology that I absolutely believe in, and which is around the customer development methodology, which is all about testing out what your customer wants and selling something to the customer before actually developing something. Because you get out of your ivory tower and you get punched in the marketplace maybe, but it still is all worth it. So LinkedIn polls, good advantages, some disadvantages for people who are doing it for the wrong reasons. But I would certainly say that if I'm going to see too many LinkedIn polls like I have been seeing in the month of March, maybe that's just a fad. I hope it kind of dies down. Please use them sparingly. Otherwise, of course, the law of diminishing marginal utility or returns is going to kick in and nobody is going to respond to polls. On that weird note, then, I hope you like this diary entry of mine. The Traveling Professor Investigates, my video series, is up with something called Cyborgs, wherein I explore whether smartphones are actually using us to become smarter, or are we actually extending ourselves into the smartphone and kind of outsourcing our sense of self. It's an interesting take on it. Do take a look at it. Follow me on the Traveling Professor, I'm the Traveling Professor rather, on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And if you love podcasts like these, well, IVM Podcasts puts up a lot of good stuff out there. Do take a look at that. On that happy note then, until next time.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Would like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. Syed, thank you so much for sticking with us. On the Paisa Vaisa podcast, Anupam was joined by Sujata Alawat, who spoke about women's credit behavior and about improving credit scores for better financial health. Gauri Devi Dayal was joined by Barkha Dutt on This Round Is On Me. She shared her thoughts on present-day media and journalism and some of her experiences from the days of her reporting. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talked about how meditation is like getting engrossed and absorbed into an activity where you are free of other thoughts and focus on just one thing. On Agra Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi were joined by Supriya and Priyanka Joshi for an honest and heartfelt conversation about life as a woman in the 2020s. On the Filter Coffee podcast this week, Karthik invited Bala Srinivas, who has been an active mentor in the startup scene in India, and they discussed its various aspects from funding to government support. Our traveling professor Siddharth talks about this academic document called Statement of Purpose and helps us understand its concept and shares and some tips on how to draft it well. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.